So I'm delighted to be joined by Jerome Selmer, who's come down to sax.co.uk today, who of course is the current general manager at Selmer and in the fourth generation of the name. Of course, he bears the famous Selmer name, so it's wonderful to be discussing the famous brand with Selmer right in front of me here. Now, the overall discussion point today is about the very sax that's in my hands here, the new, relatively new Seles Axos, which was conceived in 2015. But before going into that, I think it's probably only right that we talk a little bit more about your role in the company and perhaps some of the changes that you've seen in your time since you've been working for the company. I believe you joined in 1981, which was perhaps 82, sorry, yeah. Which was perhaps an exciting time in the context of the company. The Super Action 80 had come out.
And after the Series 2, the Series 3, the reference, and now the Seles Axos.
Right, so you've seen all of this change.
That's a kind of a new strategy from the family. Right. The idea was to come with a new instruments for different budgets, because something less expensive. But the idea was to find an instruments with less expensive, with a Selmer quality. That's the idea. So the instruments is made in France, assembled in France. So it's printed made in France. So it's important. But we have some partners in other countries who helps us to find lower price and primary pieces and small parts from Chinese and other countries, but integrally the product is made in France. That's important, yeah.
And has the concept of the Seles Axos been many years in the making? So prior to the public being aware of its conception, was it something that you were thinking about for many years, as in it was a consideration in the context of the other very successful instruments, so the Series 2, the Series 3 and the reference? Was this something that you've been considering for a while?
We thought about this idea, a couple of years ago. During that time we were in the world crisis, and it was hard sometimes to make good business because we get lower orders from every country because it was really a bad period. But at that time we decided to innovate and create and think about a new line, a new mark, Seles, because we want to make a big distinction between Selmer Paris and Seles. Selmer Paris is still made by hands to small quantity in a pure tradition, and Seles is a more industrial approach. So it was maybe, to be honest with you, better to separate both of these two marks.
Absolutely.
That's the idea.
Yes.
And Series 2, I think, is most, I would say, a legendary instrument for us at that time, because many people have been playing Series 2 for a long time, and they are the sound of the Selmer in the sound, from generation to generation. And with the Axos, we want to be close about this origin of the Selmer sound.
Yes, that's one of the points I wanted to bring in. Since the Seles Axos has come out, and I was aware that the price point was a good deal lower than the current Jubilee models, my first thought was, are you going to retain that Selmer kind of character of core sound there? And in my imagination, this must have been one of your main aims, to try and maintain that Selmer definition in the sound. And I think you've certainly achieved this. And it fascinates me how you have managed to achieve this considering where it's priced. Can you tell us a little bit about the process of how you've managed to maintain that Selmer essence in the sound, but using these different manufacturing processes?
Okay, so the idea, when you know how to make a Selmer, we try to duplicate this with a lower price. That's the idea. So, as I told you before, we are more in an industrial way and environment in a factory, just to lower the cost of pieces, and also that's the most important. That is the best way to make the instruments down. But the idea was also to keep the sound, because people, they will say, what is this Axos? What is it? It's connecting with Selmer? Yes, it's connecting with Selmer, because when you play it, you feel like in your sleepers. I feel home because I find exactly the same. The sound is almost rich as a Selmer, so I feel home. That's important.
Yes. In fact, my thinking of this instrument when trying all three of the current and well-known Selmer models, the Series 2 and the Series 3, and the reference is that it's closest to me to the Series 2. It's got that, the sound is very much borrowed from the Series 2, and perhaps there's just a subtle difference in some of the overtones, shall we say.
We call that some alternatives of the sound. That's, in his mind, is a Selmer sound. That's important.
Yes, I mean, I've actually got a Series 2 alongside me here, as well as some of the other Selmers you might see behind you. And perhaps I'll just play just something more brief on the Axos, and then try and play something very similar on the 2, and perhaps come back to this just so we can hear those subtle differences. So let's go for something a little bit more kind of long-toned and tuneful. Okay, so that's the Axos. A little bit flat, so I'm going to push in, or the comparison is not valid. Which is interesting straight away that there's a different mouthpiece position, in fact. So they are different. Perhaps you can hear the difference. I can certainly feel the difference as a player.
Okay.
There's a little bit more in terms of perhaps the bass end, I find, in the Series 2, some of those lower harmonics. But actually the core sound is very similar. It's got that Selmer sort of stamped all over it.
Maybe the Series 2 for me is richer in harmonics.
Yes.
And the Axo is still a Selmer, but I think the idea was to make an instrument easier blowing easier blowing.
It's very free.
So we lose a little bit harmonics, but you feel home anyway.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, and it's very responsive, and it's got a very natural sort of true sound to it.
That was important because we didn't want people to make connection with Chinese products. We can print the name Selmer on it and say it's a Selmer. No, yes, it's a Selmer, because you find the spirit of Selmer and it's made in France. So that's very important.
Yeah.
Very important.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think you've achieved that there. Yes. And I suppose it's relatively new in terms of its release into the wider world, into the brass and wind specialists. So it was released in 2015. We've had it on our shelves since then. Do you have a plan for its evolution, or is it going to stay the same as it is? Are you going to perhaps make any adjustments to the current model, do anything to it technically, or stick with it as it is?
I think right now the Axis is, we could say, is a new instrument, so we'll keep it as it. Maybe we'll do some small technical evaluations, so as a normal we do on the right productions.
Right.
But we're thinking maybe also to extend the brand name Seles.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
So come with other instruments. Maybe at time we'll come with a quatuor, tenor, soprano, alto, and bari.
Okay.
That's important.
That makes sense.
Okay.
Yes.
I think we'll help to make the new mark Seles known all over the world. And the idea is also in each country to go to musicians and let them try and say, you know, it's a Seles, it's a new word for you, a new mark, but it's a sound. That's important.
Absolutely. Yes, ultimately it needs to get into the hands of the musicians for the information to filter through.
Yeah.
So we start with the high profile musicians, filters to the next level of musicians, and then eventually into the sort of wider conscious of
and the idea is just to create a demand in the shops after that.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. And as a final cheeky question, besides the subject of the Seles Axos, which we've been discussing, can Selmer reveal any other new secret models that might be coming out in the future? Or perhaps is this something I should ask off air?
You have to know that we're working on a new line of saxophone.
Okay.
Because the idea was the Axos, and we are to increase the difference between Axos and the Selmer Paris. So it's not yet finished, but it's on the right road. It's keep also. The idea is to keep the Selmer sound, but increase the tuning, do a better tuning, and work on the emission of the instruments.
Right.
That's the idea. So it's not yet finished. I won't promise and don't give you any date.
Okay.
But it's on the road.
Yeah, I love it when Selmer tell me this, the no promises, the no dates. It's fantastic. It keeps me on the edge of my seat. Yeah. Jérôme, it's been a real pleasure talking to you today. Thank you for coming down to Saxophone.
Invite me. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.